So today's case concerns a string of unsolved murders in the city of Albuquerque, murders that most people believe are the work of a serial killer. The murders took place sometime between 2003 and 2005, though they might have started as early as 2001. The murders have colloquially come to be known as the West Mesa murders, and the supposed serial killer that committed them has come to be known as the West Mesa Bone Collector or the Bone Collector of New Mexico. So let's dive into this case. So first off, what is the West Mesa? This case takes place in Albuquerque, so why is it called the West Mesa murders? Not being from this area of the country myself, this confused me a little bit. The West Mesa is a landmass in the desert in or around Albuquerque. And as we'll see in a little while, it was a pivotal area in this story. So let's talk for a second about Albuquerque's East Central Corridor. This is an area frequented by prostitutes as well as those wanting to solicit one. Between 2001 and 2005, an unusually high number of prostitutes went missing in this area. I'm going to give you the names and circumstances of some of these women now. I will let you know going in that there is a fair amount of contradictory information in a lot of these reports. Because these women were involved in sex work and often drugs, their families and loved ones would often go weeks or months at a time without seeing them. So there's often a gap between their last sighting and a missing persons report being filed. I think that might have contributed to the misinformation in this case, though having done this for a while now, I will say that there is a decent amount of contradictory information in most cases. There's also a varying amount of details on these women and the circumstances surrounding their disappearances. Some had plenty of details, while others had very few. I tried to give enough details so you could get a sense of the circumstances surrounding their disappearances. Monica Candelaria was reported missing on May 11, 2003, almost 2 weeks after she'd last been seen in the South Valley. Investigators heard from her friends that she'd been killed and buried on the mesa. They followed up on this rumor, but it led nowhere, and her case was ultimately handed over to cold case detectives. She was 21. Doreen Marquez was last seen in October 2003. Like most of these other missing women, Doreen had struggled with addiction for years, but had finally gotten clean earlier that month. She was last seen either dropping off one of her children at school or walking alone in a neighborhood. She was 27. Doreen was reported missing by her sister on at least 3 separate occasions. When her sister went to the police station later on, she learned that those reports had never been filled out completely or even filed. Victoria Chavez was last seen either in 2003 or 2004 after a night out with her family. While out with them, she got a call from her boyfriend and told her mom that she'd meet up with the family again later that night. She never showed up. Her mom assumed she had gone back to her wild life, as she put it. She did report her daughter missing about a year after she'd last been seen, in March of either 2004 or 2005. Victoria was 24. Veronica Romero was last seen by her family on either February 14th or February 15th of 2004. She was reported missing that same day, whichever day that was. She was about 28. 27-year-old Evelyn Salazar was last seen at a family gathering. She and her cousin, 15-year-old Jamie Barella, left to go to a park in southeast Albuquerque. Neither of them were seen again. Jamie was the only victim not involved in drugs or sex work. Sylvania Edwards ran away from a girls' group home in Lawton, Oklahoma in 2003 at the age of 15. She was reported missing that same year and spotted in Colorado the following year. She wasn't seen again. 24-year-old Virginia Cloven was reported missing in June 2004 by her dad, who hadn't spoken to her in a few months. The last time they spoke, she said she was moving in with her boyfriend. I have no idea who or where he is now. Cinnamon Elks was last seen after being arrested in 2004. I'm not sure how long she was in police custody. About a month after she was last seen, she was reported missing by her mom, who knew something was wrong when her daughter didn't call for her birthday in August of that year. Another source said Cinnamon was reported missing by her cousin. She was 32 and I believe the oldest victim. Julie Nieto was last seen in August 2004 at her grandfather's house. She left to pick up her son at the school bus and was later reported missing by her cousin. One source said Julie was 23 and another said 24. Gina Michelle Valdez was last seen in September 2004. Her mother knew something was wrong when Michelle didn't call for her birthday a few days later. Michelle also missed her daughter's birthday party that month, something she never would have done. She was reported missing later that year, either by her mother or her father. She was 22. I'm not sure if her loved ones knew this at the time, but when she disappeared, she was 4 months pregnant with her third child. Soon after her disappearance, Michelle's mother contacted several local TV stations, asking them to air something about her daughter's disappearance, but none of them would. Some sources have referred to Michelle by her full name, Gina Michelle Valdez. Others have called her just Michelle, so I'm assuming that's what she went by. I will call her Michelle for the rest of this video just for clarity's sake. In 2005, Albuquerque detective Ida Lopez noticed this unusually high level of disappearances. In August of that year, she compiled a list that included all of these women, with the exception of Cylenia Edwards, who hadn't been reported missing in Albuquerque. The list was published in the Albuquerque Tribune in 2007. On February 2nd, 2009, Albuquerque resident Christine Ross was walking her dog on the west side of the city when she found a bone on the trail. She thought the bone looked strange, so she took a picture of it and sent it to her sister, who is a nurse. Her sister said the bone looked like a human femur. Christine contacted the Albuquerque police, and testing confirmed that the bone was human. Detectives began combing through the city's West Mesa, where the bone had been found. Investigators worked around the clock for about 2.5 months looking for bodies or evidence. What they found was a mass grave covering about 100 acres, an area which they would later dub the Pit. The bodies were buried in shallow graves in what has been referred to as the largest crime scene in the city's history. One source even referred to it as the largest crime scene in U.S. history. At a few points, the possibility of a second burial site has been brought up, but nothing substantial has been found. The first victim was identified on February 10th, 2009. The body was that of Victoria Chavez. One by one, missing women were ID'd in the following order. Gina Michelle Valdez, who was 4 months pregnant at the time of her death. Cinnamon Elks. Julie Nieto. Monica Candelaria. Veronica Romero. Doreen Marquez. Cylenia Edwards. Virginia Clove. Evelyn Salazar. Jamie Barella was the last to be identified on January 26, 2010. Other than Michelle Valdez's unborn child, she was the youngest victim found in the pit. Altogether, the victims consisted of 9 adult women, 2 teenage girls, and 1 unborn child. Most sources put the victim count at 11, though technically if you count the unborn child, it would be 12. At one point, investigators did think there was an extra body, but as it turned out, some of the bones they thought belonged to different bodies were actually the same body. The deaths were all ruled homicides, but the remains were too decomposed to determine cause of death. There were no obvious signs of trauma on the bones, such as gunshot wounds. Investigators believe all the victims were killed and buried between 2003 and 2005. After Michelle Valdez was identified, one of the same news stations her family had contacted after her disappearance got in touch with them again, asking for information. They refused to speak to them, angry from this alleged earlier dismissal. I'm not sure which news station these allegations were directed to or any other details. Police do believe one person is responsible for burying all of the bodies. However, a few weeks after the discovery of the mass grave, Police Chief Ray Schultz said it was too premature to determine if these murders were all the work of a serial killer. I'm not sure if he or any of the other investigators still believe this today. Most sources and people who I came across in my research seem to believe that they are the work of a serial killer. Because the bodies were a few years old by the time, Schultz also believed that Albuquerque residents didn't have to worry about an active serial killer at that time. At the time of the discovery, Mike Geyer, who was the head of Albuquerque Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit, was confident that the case would be solved within the year. And investigators worked hard at it. They interviewed people working on the East Central Corridor, as well as some of the victims' ex-boyfriends. They took homemade missing persons posters to the New Mexico State Fair and collected DNA samples from family and friends. They followed leads inside New Mexico, as well as Texas and Arizona. At one point, they got a tip about a man who had a shrine to the victims in his home. They did interview him, but ultimately determined he had nothing to do with the murders and was just doing his own kind of analysis on the case, according to Mike Geyer. In 2010, police released photos of 7 unidentified women and asked for the public's help in identifying them, believing they may be connected to the West Mesa murders. One of the women was eventually identified. She had died several years earlier and was ultimately thought to not be connected to the murders. I read another report that said another of the women had been identified, but also not believed to be connected. I couldn't find any other information about these photos. Another man investigated early on was Ron Irwin. Irwin was a photographer, I believe from Illinois, who often came to Albuquerque to photograph the state fair. Many of these trips brought him to the city around the same time as some of the disappearances. Search warrants on 2 of his houses and his photography studio were carried out in August 2010. 2 of his cameras and thousands of photographs were looked at. His truck was impounded by police, and even his mother was interviewed. However, he was ruled out in 2011 because he wasn't in the area on some of the other days that other women went missing. In a Reddit thread on the case started around 2017, a few people commented saying they were from the Albuquerque area and knew Ron Irwin. They described him as kind of strange, but agreed he probably wasn't physically capable of killing people and dumping their bodies out in the desert. Obviously, I have no way of confirming these statements are true, but I thought they were worth mentioning. The thread also mentions a similarity between this case and the unsolved murder of Amber Tuccaro. Amber Tuccaro was 20 years old when she went missing from Nisku, close to Edmonton in Canada, in 2010. Her body was found 2 years later, shortly after a recording was released. The recording was from Amber's last phone call, and at least part of the audio was released to the public in the hopes that someone would recognize the voice of the man she was talking to. The Reddit thread on the West Mesa murders mentions the similarity between the voice of the last man Amber Tuccaro talked to and another voice of a man claiming to have carried out the West Mesa murders. I listened to the voice comparison and they did sound similar, but it's also pretty hard to tell over the telephone. I will leave that video linked down below if you want to listen for yourself. Early on in the West Mesa case, there was a $25,000 reward offered. By August 2010, it had been increased to $100,000, and I believe that amount is still available. So let's talk about some theories in this case. Early theories included a pimp, someone who was in prison when the bodies were found, gang activity, someone who was deployed overseas when the bodies were found, and someone who didn't like prostitutes. There was also speculation the murders were connected to a possible serial killer in Wisconsin who had killed prostitutes between 1987 and 2007. There was also speculation that the killer or killers stopped burying bodies in that area in 2005 because so many subdivisions were springing up in the area. If this is true, there could be more bodies buried elsewhere, including more women from Ida Lopez's list who are still missing. Other theories include a politician who solicited one of the prostitutes and was later afraid of being exposed. There's also been talk that the killer is actually a police officer. One report said Cinnamon Elks told her friends that a dirty cop was chopping off the heads of prostitutes and burying them on the West Mesa. She disappeared shortly after this statement was made. In addition to the theories and speculation, 2 suspects have been publicly named. The first one is Lorenzo Montoya. On December 17, 2006, Montoya met 19-year-old escort Sharika Hill in an online chat room. He invited her over to his house, where he allegedly killed her and attempted to dispose of her body by wrapping it in a rug. Before he could do this, Sharika's boyfriend came over to check on her and subsequently shot and killed Montoya. Montoya has also been a suspect in several other prostitute disappearances. He was charged with raping and choking a prostitute in 1999, but these charges were later dismissed. Lorenzo Montoya also frequented the East Central Corridor. He was arrested in 1998 when he picked up someone he presumably believed was a prostitute, but was actually an undercover detective. In 2016, police investigated a sex tape Montoya was in. They wanted to know the identity of the women in the tapes, if they were connected to the West Mesa murders, and if they were alive and okay. I don't believe any of these women have ever been identified. As far as I know, Montoya is still being investigated as a suspect in the West Mesa murders, albeit posthumously. The second suspect is Joseph Blea. The same month the first body was discovered, Blea's ex-wife, April Gillen, called police and said she thought he might know something. Blea owned a landscaping business and frequently dumped debris on the West Mesa at night. A tree tag was found at the burial site and was later traced back to Blea's business. He was also known to solicit prostitutes in and around the East Central Corridor. One of Blea's ex-wives said that he often speaks about his hatred for prostitutes, calling them dirty whores and sluts, sometimes calling them by name. I'm not sure if this is the same ex that reported him to police. Blea's house was searched in June 2009. It was searched again in October of that year, along with his jail cell. I can never find out what he was in jail for at the time, but more on his criminal history in a minute. Blea's wife at the time also said she would often find jewelry in their house that didn't belong to her or her daughter, and that her daughter had once found women's underwear in their shed. I assume this underwear also didn't belong to either of them. Some of the families of the West Mesa murder victims said they noticed pieces of the women's jewelry missing as well. Police haven't said if any of the jewelry found in Blea's home matches the jewelry that the victims were missing. Blea is also suspected in the murder of another prostitute, Jennifer Lynn Sherm, in 1985. DNA evidence in the case matched him. I'm not sure where the DNA came from, if it was actually on her body or somewhere else at the crime scene. He's never been charged in her murder. In 2013, Blea was tied to 4 rape cases. In 2015, he was convicted for the rape of a 13-year-old girl in 1988. A few days later, he pled no contest to 5 more rape charges. Altogether, he ended up sentenced to 90 years in prison. He has exhausted all of his appeals, so unless something drastic happens, he's never getting out. In the summer of 2014, Detective Ida Lopez retired, and the West Mesa murder case was taken over by Detective Mark Mannery. However, Lopez returned to the case the following year, and as far as I know, is still working on it. As early as 2015, there's been talk of building a memorial park on the site of the mass grave. As of February 2019, it is under construction. Also in 2019, 2 New Mexico senators introduced a bill that would encourage a memorial honoring the victims and for investigators to look at the case again. The bill also mentions 9 Jane Does found at the site. This was the first mention I found of any remaining Jane Does at the site, so I'm not sure where that information came from. In January 2018, Street Safe New Mexico created a billboard campaign to raise awareness about the case. This nonprofit organization was created in direct response to the West Mesa murders, and according to their website, tries to reduce the harmful consequences associated with life on the street. In July 2018, a construction crew found more bones near the mass grave. These bones were found to be of an ancient Native American, probably from between 1100 and 1300 AD, not connected to the West Mesa murders. In 2019, Street Safe New Mexico held a memorial for the 10th anniversary of the bodies being found. Cases of missing and murdered sex workers have a reputation for not being taken seriously, both by police and the general public. However, these murders might have changed that in Albuquerque. In a 2013 interview, Ray Schultz said there was a conscious shift in the Albuquerque Police Department to take prostitutes more seriously. A prostitute named Christine said that same year that other prostitutes in the area had become more conscious about watching out for each other and not taking more dangerous jobs. She also noted an improved relationship between prostitutes and police, saying police used to laugh at them when they reported a crime, but now they were cool with us and more proactive about arresting their accused attackers. There are still at least 6 missing women in the Albuquerque area thought to be connected to the West Mesa murders. If the killer or killers was or were involved in their disappearances, there very well could be a second grave site, as was speculated earlier. Darlene Trujillo was last seen on July 4th, 2001 at the age of 20. She dropped her son off at her grandmother's and informed her grandmother she was going on a 2-day trip to Arizona. She never returned. Her loved ones don't believe she would have willingly abandoned her son. Anna Vigil was last seen on January 21st, 2005 at the age of 20. There aren't many more details about her disappearance, though there was a note that she was addicted to heroin at the time. She has a tattoo of a rose with the name Paul on her right ankle. There is a 2014 report of a woman named Anna Vigil being shot and killed in Albuquerque. However, this is almost certainly a different person, and their identical names and cities are coincidence. Felipa Gonzalez was last seen on April 27, 2005 at the age of 22. She was released from jail shortly before her disappearance. She has a tattoo of Winnie the Pooh on her back and one of her name on her ankle. Nina Heron was last seen on May 14, 2005 at the age of 21. She was last seen at her house in Albuquerque. She has the initials NH tattooed on her left middle finger, 3 dot tattoos above her left thumb, and an animal character tattooed on her left calf. Chantel Waits was last seen on May 15, 2006 at the age of 29. She is missing several teeth and has the word lady tattooed on her right leg. She might go by her middle name, Monique. Another source said her leg tattoo was actually of a woman, not the word lady, and that she had another unspecified tattoo on one of her ankles. Leah Peebles was last seen on May 22, 2006 at the age of 23. She had just dropped off her car for repairs in an area known for drugs and prostitution. She moved to the Albuquerque area to start fresh after getting clean from drug addiction, but I'm not sure how long she had been there. She has brown hair but is known to frequently dye it. If you have any information on the disappearances of any of these women, you can contact the Albuquerque Police Department at 505-843-7867 or the New Mexico Department of Public Safety's Missing Person Hotline at 1-800-457-3463. If you have any information about the West Mesa murders, you can contact the West Mesa tip lines at 505-250-7378 or 505-768-2450. You can also contact the 118th Street Task Force at 1-877-765-8273 or Crime Stoppers at 505-843-STOP. You can also email information to Detective Denise Myers or Ida Lopez. I will leave those emails below. So that's all I have for you today on the West Mesa murders. From what little I've seen of the investigators in this case, it seems like they genuinely care about these victims and want justice for them and answers for their loved ones. Despite its rocky start, I'm pretty confident that this case will be solved, even if it takes a few more years. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.